NBA Fantasy Salary Cap Edition, Midseason Top 5. Highlighting NBA Fantasy Salary Cap Edition's top 5 players so far in the 2024-25 season. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. The 2024-25 NBA season is officially at its halfway point, and if you're into fantasy basketball, it's the perfect time to reassess your roster. Today we're diving into the top 5 players in the NBA Fantasy Salary Cap Edition so far this season. These are the guys who've been putting up highlight-worthy numbers every week. Let's get into it. First up, we've got the man who's pretty much the face of fantasy basketball right now, Nikola Jokic. If you're talking fantasy favorites, Jokic is the clear number one. The Denver Nuggets center is having another historic season, racking up 2,409.9 total fantasy points so far, which makes him the front-runner to be the first player this season to hit 2,500 fantasy points. Jokic is averaging over 60 fantasy points per game, FPPG, and he's had a ridiculous 13 games with over 70 points, including 3 games over 80 in Week 11 alone. At a salary of $20.9 million, Jokic isn't cheap, but for good reason. He's been an absolute force with 19 triple-doubles this season. That's 10 more than the next closest player, LeBron James. He's not missed many games either, with only 6 missed out of 43, and his consistency makes him a no-brainer for any fantasy team. Coming in at number 2, we've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from the Oklahoma City Thunder. Shai has been a scoring machine, and he just set a career high with 54 points in a game after missing his first game of the season. That performance earned him a season-best 83.1 fantasy points. He's been leading OKC to the best record in the NBA, sitting at 36-7, and has 2,291.9 total fantasy points with 54.6 FPPG, which is second and fourth in the league respectively. Shai has put up 60-plus fantasy points in 13 games, and he rarely has a bad game, just 5 games with fewer than 40 fantasy points. At a salary of $17.7 million, he's not exactly cheap, but when you're talking about an MVP-level player, he's well worth the investment. Next up, we have Anthony Davis of the Los Angeles Lakers. Davis has always been a bit of an injury concern, but this season he's proving that he's worth the risk. At 31 years old, he's having one of the best seasons of his career, ranking 3rd in total fantasy points with 32.1 TFP and 6th in FPPG at 53.5. He's been putting up some monster performances, including a 73.8 fantasy point game, and he's crossed 60 fantasy points 13 times. Davis has played in 38 of 41 games, showing that his body is holding up well this season. At a salary of $16.9 million, he's a bit pricey, but with his consistent double-double production and elite fantasy point totals, he's well worth the investment. Moving on, let's talk about Jason Tatum from the Boston Celtics. Tatum's been a consistent fantasy stud all season, with 23.9 total fantasy points and 49.4 FPPG, ranking 4th and 8th in the league. Despite the Celtics hitting a rough patch with a 10-8 record recently, Tatum's numbers haven't dipped. He's had 19 games with 50-plus fantasy points, and only 7 games with fewer than 40. Tatum's been the go-to guy in Boston, and with just 3 missed games this season, he's a steady fantasy option. At a salary of $16.5 million, he's the 9th most expensive player, but his consistent production makes him an attractive pick, and his ownership is on the rise. Last but certainly not least, we have the one and only Giannis Antetokounmpo from the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis is an absolute fantasy beast, ranking 2nd in FPPG at 57.8 and 5th in total fantasy points with 22.3 TFP. He set the bar for fantasy excellence this season with the most single-game fantasy points, scoring a ridiculous 98.3 fantasy points in a game against the Detroit Pistons, where he put up 59 points, 14 rebounds, and 7 assists. Giannis has topped 60 fantasy points in 14 games and has been incredibly consistent, failing to score less than 40 fantasy points just once. With a salary of $17.7 million, he's another high-cost player, but his upside is undeniable. So there you have it, the top 5 fantasy players so far in the 2024-2025 NBA season. Nikola Jokic is the clear leader, followed by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Anthony Davis, Jason Tatum, and Giannis Antetokounmpo, all of whom have been putting up monster numbers consistently. If you're looking to make some moves for the second half of the season, these guys are the ones you want to target. They may cost you a pretty penny, but they're definitely worth the investment if you want to dominate your fantasy league. Let me know in the comments who your top fantasy players are this season, and if you're thinking about picking any of these guys up for your team. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more fantasy basketball content, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.